Hello guys, this is your friend, What If Sing Short Stories, and this is What If Dick formed an agency with his classmates after defeating AFO. And now this is where the story starts. Prologue: this world is a superhuman society, with about 80% of the population possessing some uncanny ability called a quirk. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and I was born quirkless, but my life completely changed when I met the #1 pro, All Might. He transferred his quirk, one for all, to me. After that, I enrolled at UA High, the prestigious school known for producing first-class heroes. I continue to run toward my dream along with the friends I've made on my journey. This is the story of how I became the world's greatest hero. At least, that's how I would normally start things off, but the world seems so different now. All for One, the villain whose quirk gave birth to the power of One for All, has been defeated. The accumulated strength of my gifted abilities, along with the efforts of my friends, put an end to his reign of terror once and for all. That was during our third year at UA High. In an effort to keep the involved students safe, the details of the battle were hidden from the general public. I was sent to our island with my mom to keep us away from any potential media scrutiny, and, while we were there, Melissa's shield was able to use her technical expertise to aid in my recovery process. Due to the extenuating circumstances, I was also allowed to finish my UA coursework remotely, and graduated with my classmates on schedule. It's been about a year since a battle, and I am finally back at full strength both physically and mentally. Although defeating All for One may have secretly made me the world's greatest hero, I'm ready to return home to continue running toward my dream. This is the story of the final part of my journey. And it begins with the news I had hoped I would never have to hear. Chapter 1. There was a chill in the air. The last leaves of autumn clung to their branches as a cold wind threatened to send them falling to the cemetery below. The gust ruffled a mess of green hair and nipped at the tear-soaked face beneath it. These features belonged to a plain-looking young man of 19 who knelt in silence beside a bespectacled woman with the foresight to tie her blonde tresses up to defend against the wind. A diminutive older gentleman in a yellow cloak stood nearby. These three remained quiet for some time in front of a particularly new grave marker engraved with the name Toshinori Yagi. I can't believe he's actually gone, Melissa, the young man whispered, barely able to get the words through his clenched throat. The girl laid a comforting hand on his shoulder. I know what you mean, Dick. Uncle Might always seemed invincible, she said wistfully. Nothing ever kept him down for long. Toshinori was many things, replied the gray-haired elder, but invincible was not one of them. He bore the weight of the world on his shoulders, regardless of the toll it took on him. He was idealistic almost to a fault, but, to his credit, he kept those ideals. He was a good man. He closed his eyes and looked toward the ground. And a good friend. It was late autumn when the news got out. Everyone dies. It's one of life's great constants, but nobody expected it from All Might, especially not so quietly or suddenly. Even though his true form was revealed to the world during the Camino incident over 3 years prior, he was still the symbol of peace in their hearts and memories. He passed away peacefully in the middle of the night as a result of the injuries he acquired long before Camino, and yet the world reacted as if he died on the front lines in his prime. Across the globe, people mourned, candlelight vigils were held, and memorial services honoring their greatest hero were broadcast on every major news network. And yet, at the gravesite of Toshinori Yagi, the man behind the legend, only these three were gathered to lay him to rest. Izuku Midoriya, the freckled young man with the verdant mop of hair, was All Might's protege and successor to the power of One for All. The symbol of peace was Midoriya's idol, but over the years of training and build trust, the boy came to think of him more like a father figure in the absence of his own. The slightly older blonde was Melissa Shield, daughter of the brilliant David Shield. During All Might's time in America, he and David developed a brotherly bond, and that bond carried over to Melissa. These two were some of the closest things to a family the pro hero had, and although David was unable to travel due to island regulations, Melissa felt that it was important to come and pay her final respects to her Uncle Might. Rounding out the trio was Sorohiko Torino, otherwise known as the retired pro Gran Torino. When All Might's predecessor, Nana Shinra, perished in a battle with All For One, Torino fulfilled his promise to her and continued Toshinori's training. Later, when the torch had been passed to Dick, Torino mentored the UA student and taught him how to use One For All without consistently destroying his body. In spite of his advanced age, he had managed to outlive two of his closest friends. It was with a heavy heart that he carried out his duties as the executor of All Might's estate on this day. I thought that, by defeating All For One, I had prevented Sir Nidea's vision from coming true, Izuku said. He wasn't supposed to leave yet. Not like this. I never got to keep my promise to him. A fresh wave of grief washed over him as he buried his face in his hands. Promise? Melissa asked, a little confused. During the last year of Midoriya's recovery, the two had formed a sort of sibling bond over their shared familial relationship with All Might. Yet, through all their discussions, this had never been brought up. Izuku cleared his throat and stared at his hero's grave. Back at my first sports festival, I promised him that he would see me stand before the world and tell them, I am here. Then I got caught up in the responsibilities of One For All and all the events after that. I thought I had more time. Now the time is gone. And I'll never get another chance. Izuku Midoriya. Torino turned to the mourning young man. You gave Toshinori a great gift, far greater than repeating some silly catchphrase. Through your determination and perseverance, you were able to master One For All and avenge the many lives that were destroyed by All For One and his minions of darkness. I know for a fact that Toshinori thought he wouldn't live to see the day that the sacrifices he and his predecessors made would come to fruition, but, thanks to you, his spirit can now rest in peace. He was very proud of you. Midoriya began to dry his face with his sleeve. You never struck me as one for sentiment, Gran Torino, sir. He mustered a small grin. His heart still ached, but the words of the old hero did raise his spirits a little. There's a time for everything. Torino smirked. We can't all be as earnest as you, kid. The trio had a cathartic laugh at the expense of that boy's emotional tendencies. It's good to see you smile again, Dick, Melissa said softly, looking at her friend. It's what Uncle Might would have wanted. He always used to say that, no matter how scary things get, you need to smile, as if to say, I'm okay to trick the fear inside you, Izuku remembered. Gran Torino sighed. The people in this world who can smile are always the strongest. The old man remembered the words of his sworn friend, Nana, as he gazed at her grave which lay adjacent to Toshinori's. The trio stood in bittersweet reminiscence for a few moments longer, a sense of hope for the future building in each of them. I will carry on your legacy, All Might, Dick resolved, looking intently at his mentor's resting place. The world has been without a symbol of peace for too long. I'm going to do everything in my power to change that. That's the spirit. Melissa cheered, giving the young man a friendly jab in the shoulder. You're going to do great, kid, Gran Torino said. Toshinori thought so too, which is why, as executor of his estate, he wanted me to give this to you when he passed. He produced a manila envelope from his cloak and handed it to the surprised young man. What's this? Midoriya asked as he opened the envelope and pulled out the documents inside. Toshinori lived his life as a service to the world and out of a desire to help his fellow man, Torino explained while Dick browsed the contents. He had no use for the fame or compensation past that. However, he did not want to assume the same of the one who came after him. He knew that individual would have to deal with far worse due to his failure to stop All for One the first time. So he saved the revenue he acquired from being the No. 1 hero and left it as an inheritance to his successor, Izuku Midoriya. Dick was paralyzed, his eyes locked on the bottom line of the legal document he was holding. Melissa's eyes grew wide as she peered over his shoulder and saw the amount listed on the document. That's a lot of zeros. Izuku came to his senses as Gran Torino turned to leave. Wait, what am I supposed to do with all this? The old man stopped, turned his head to look at the boy, and smiled. Be the hero that Toshinori saw in you. And with a blast of wind, Izuku and Melissa were left alone in the cemetery. Chapter 2 Midoriya spent the rest of the day and most of the next morning dealing with signing the various legal documents and initiating the transfer of the inheritance All Might had left him. It was mentally exhausting, but it was also a welcome distraction from the emotional drain placed on him by the funeral the day prior. He took no pleasure in the reason he was receiving this sudden windfall, but if his hero had entrusted this fortune to him, he was going to be sure it was put to good use. After the final papers had been signed, Melissa accompanied Izuku to Takoba Municipal Beach Park, where he hoped to clear his mind and figure out his next step. Wow, this place is amazing. Melissa's eyes shone with wonder as she took in the beauty of the beach. I've spent so much of my life within our island's man-made confines, I often forget what nature feels like. I can't imagine what it looked like before you cleaned it during your training with Uncle Might. Izuku sighed. In truth, he was barely listening to Melissa. His mind was reeling from the events of the last few days, and was trying to wrap his head around the blank slate that was his future. Where do I even begin? With this inheritance, I'm likely ranking among some of the richest people in the country right now. Obviously, I'm going to devote most of it to hero work, but even that isn't enough direction. Hero agencies that have been in business for decades have been struggling with their reputations and finances ever since the Yek incident. To the rest of the world, I'm just a wannabe high school graduate with no experience. Stain, Overhaul, even All for One. My involvement in those battles was kept under wraps due to my student status. If I want to uphold All Might's legacy, I have a lot of groundwork to make up. How did, Dick, you're mumbling again? Melissa broke through the boy's thoughts. Apparently they hadn't been as internal as he intended. Sorry, Melissa. There's just a lot to process. Midoriya sat on a nearby bench and stared out at the ocean. All Might meant so much to me. I don't want his legacy to fade away with his death, but I'm at a loss for how to best bear the torch. The two sat silently for a few minutes, listening to the waves crash on the shore. You know, Uncle Might was in a similar position when he first started out, Melissa spoke up. Daddy always said that when they first met, Uncle Might was just another nobody. No public experience, no flashy name recognition. None of that. He was just another starry-eyed UA grabbed with a pocket full of change and a head full of dreams. It didn't help that he was also starting from scratch in a foreign country. And yet he was still able to make a name for himself and become the symbol of peace the world knew him as. Did your dad mention how he made the transition? Izuku hoped that maybe some insight into his mentor's beginnings might shed some light on his current predicament. It really wasn't anything extraordinary. Uncle Might kept his goal in his heart, but he knew that in order to get there, he had to start from the ground and work his way up. He needed to build people's trust in him. He needed to help everyone that he could as best as he could. In order to be the symbol of peace, He had to bring peace of mind to the people, and he did that by just focusing on doing the next right thing to the fullest of his abilities. Do the next right thing, Midoriya repeated Melissa's words as he let them sink in. It was a simple directive, and yet it made the whole task seem a bit more manageable. Hey, I recognize that green mob. Is that you, Midoriya? A familiar voice called from behind the two. They turned to see a slender young woman waving at them from beside a food cart on the sidewalk. She had short, purple hair, and cord-like protrusions dangling from her ears. Yero. Izuku jumped up and ran to meet his old classmate. I see you brought Melissa back with you. What brings you to the mainland? She asked as she twirled one of her jacks with her finger. We were just attending Uncle Mike's funeral, Melissa said as she caught up to dig. Gao. How could I be so dense? Denki must be rubbing off on me. She sighed in frustration. I'm so sorry, Midoriya. I know you two were close. How are you holding up? It's been tough, but nothing like a familiar face to lift the spirits. Dick grinned. He hadn't seen any of his classmates since relocating to our island for recovery over a year ago. Honestly, based on where everyone was from, he wasn't expecting to see anyone in his hometown at all. I'm sure a lot has changed since I've been gone. How have you and everyone else been doing, Yero? Well. She began fidgeting nervously with her ears. It's actually Kaminari now, so I guess you'd better get used to calling me Kibaka. Wait. You. And. Kaminari. This was not the type of update Izuku was expecting. It had only been a year. How much more had he missed? Yeah, it all kinda started after the Yek incident. You remember what a whirlwind everything was after that, right? We were so busy jumping from mission to mission, dealing with the fallout. Kyoka explained as Dick continued processing what he was hearing. Denki and I ended up on the same team on more than one occasion, so we got pretty tight. Once All For One was out of the picture, Denki didn't waste any time making his move. Something about dodging death and appreciating the value of life and friendship, which was pretty deep for him. You know Kaminari, usually living in the moment and not putting too much thought into it. It was sweet of him though. We would have sent you an invite, but they kept your location pretty hush-hush. So you two got married right out of high school. Melissa filled in for the still speechless Midoriya. That must have been a pretty big transition to handle so quickly. Oh, believe me, you don't know the half of it. The purple-haired girl gestured to the cart she had been pushing. It seemed to be filled with boxed lunches, but what got the duo's eye was a covered basket on top of the cart. As if on cue, a blood-curdling scream erupted from within, and Izuku instinctively moved toward it to see what the problem was. No. Kyoka dipped toward him, pulling him back just as two tendrils shot out of the basket in his direction, electricity arcing and sparking between them. Kyoka caught the two projectiles between her fingers, and with the other hand reached into her pocket and grabbed what appeared to be rubber sleeves of some sort. She deftly attached them to the end of the wriggling cables before going to work on the contents of the basket. After a few minutes, the shrieking had ceased, and calm was restored. Are you okay? Melissa laid a concerned hand on Izuku's back. What was that? He gasped, trying to catch his breath. That, Kyoka said as she turned from the basket and breathed a sigh of relief, was our daughter, Jid. It's a little past her nap time. Your daughter. This was too much new information for Dick to handle. He resisted the urge to slap himself to make sure he wasn't in the middle of some weird fever dream. Like I said, Denki acts more on impulse than on planning, she said, her voice a mixture of fondness and exasperation. He's a good man, though. He owns up to his responsibilities. Speaking of which, I need to get these lunches to the gang before they get cold. You want to come along? You mean the rest of our class? Midoriya snapped out of his existential crisis. They're all here. Yeah, most of us have been working together over the past several months. Kyoko began moving the cart up the sidewalk. I can get you caught up on the way. Come on. Everyone will be psyched to see you guys. Maybe some more than others, Melissa whispered to Izuku. Then, with a sly smirk, she turned to follow Kyoko. He knew who she was referring to. It had been so long since he had seen anyone from his class, but there was one person in particular that Midoriya secretly wanted to see more than anyone else. Chapter 3 Midoriya took in the sights as Kyoko led them down the street. Although he had been running around town all day, his mind had been in a fog. As he was looking around, he realized that this wasn't the same town he had spent most of his life in. As we approach the one-year anniversary of the defeat of the villain known as All for One, things are finally returning to normal. The sound of a news broadcast coming from a nearby electronics store caught the group's attention. They stopped to look at the TV display, as pictures flashed across the screen of the aftermath of that final confrontation. Dick felt a sense of anger mixed with guilt well up inside him as he took in the images, but it began to fade as the program played a time-lapse of the reconstruction effort. Before his eyes, the destruction was replaced with clean skylines, bright neighborhoods, and a sense of restored order. He tuned back in as the broadcast was ending. And to those unnamed heroes whose sacrifices made all of this possible, if you're listening, we're forever in your debt. I had no idea the damage was that widespread, Izuku said as they continued up the street. It's amazing how rapidly things were able to be rebuilt. Yeah, it is, Kyoko said cheerfully before taking a more somber tone, but it wasn't all good at first. When we graduated, we were ready to get out there and do our part to make a difference, but the remaining hero agencies were still struggling to make ends meet. Between repairing their damaged brands and helping cover the cost of reconstruction, none of them had any room in the budget for taking on new sidekicks. That kinda left us in a lurch. You all got your pro-hero licenses though, right? Melissa asked. I know Dick was ecstatic when he got his in the mail, but you all were just as involved as he was. You all definitely proved your worth out there. Izuku nodded in agreement. Yeah, although our student status prevented all the details from going public, the Hero Public Safety Commission was briefed on everything. Kyoko swerved the food cart around a bump in the sidewalk to keep from disturbing her napping daughter. I guess they deemed everything we'd been through enough of a final exam to warrant giving us our licenses. Just having a license doesn't guarantee you a job, though. But you said you were all working together. What have you been doing if there have been no hero jobs available? Midoriya asked with concern. He had been, so far, removed from everything during his recovery. He hadn't even considered the way his friends have been impacted over the last year. I'm getting there, Kyoko assured him. None of us had any luck signing with an existing agency, and we weren't in a financial position to open our own agencies. Then the government started handing out contracts to any and all construction firms that were able to help in the reconstruction effort, and Rarika saw an opportunity for us to do some good and help our folks out at the same time. Of course. Her parents own a construction company. That's perfect. Dick remembered Rarika telling him about it early on in their time at school. The desire to help her parents financially was one of the main reasons she wanted to be a hero in the first place. Wait, Rarika said that their financial situation wasn't the best. Oh, it wasn't. By the time the contract started rolling out, they had already let go of most of their employees and sold off a lot of their equipment. We've sort of been volunteering, Kyoko explained. Our licenses meant we could use our quirks to help lower the cost of new equipment, and with 15 of us, staffing wasn't an issue either. The only payment we're accepting is on-site housing and meals. The rest of it is going towards getting the Rarikas back on their feet. Kyoka wore a face of pride and satisfaction. It's not a glamorous or lucrative job, but it feels good to just be helping someone out, you know. That is a very heroic thing to be doing in its own way. Melissa chuckled as she saw Zook contorting his face to contain his emotions. Doesn't that hurt, Dick? What? No, I just think it's amazing that you all came together to help in that way. He looked down at the sidewalk. I wish I had been able to be a part of that instead of lying in a hospital bed. Hey, if it wasn't for you and that borrowed quirk of yours, no one would be rebuilding anything right now. Kyoka turned to reassure her friend. Melissa shot Dick a concerned look, to which he smiled and nodded. Although Melissa was let in on the family's secret shortly after the Island incident, he forgot to tell her that his class knew about One for All as well. After the events and yet almost 3 years ago, it would have been more dangerous for them to have been kept in the dark. Actually, Kyoka continued, we're working on the last of our contracts right now. I'm sure Mr. Rarica would be happy to have your help. She gestured in front of her toward a construction site on the edge of the beach. They could see the framework for a roughly 6-story building rising from behind the barricades. It was about twice as long as it was tall. It looked to be about the right size for an office building or a small apartment complex. As they rounded the corner to enter the construction site, Zook found himself smiling bigger than he had in a long time. There were his friends, all using their quirks to help make a difference. During his time away, he had been concerned that his friends would drift apart, doing their own separate things and heading out into their futures. As he stood here now, however, watching them mill around the construction site, working in sync and seamlessly integrating each other's quirks into the process, he felt the fear melt away. For the first time in over a year, he felt like he was home. Hey guys! Kyoka shouted to the crew. Look who I found while I was grabbing lunch. Everybody stopped what they were doing and turned to look. After a moment of realization, some excited cheers could be heard from around the site, but one rang out a little louder than the others. Dick! A happy voice cried out. Only one person in his class called him that. Well, at least in the tone of voice. He looked toward the front of the building where the voice was coming from and found a Chaco Rarica, jumping up and down and excitedly clapping her hands. Time seemed to stand still as a wave of emotion washed over Zook. Whether she knew it or not, this girl had changed his life. They had become fast friends early on in school, and had built an even stronger trust in each other through the trials that followed. If there was one regret he had from his time at UA, it's that his responsibilities with One for All had prevented him from pursuing that friendship more intentionally. All of that training, all of that drive, did it push her away? But what else was I supposed to do? It was all to protect her and my friends, right? Now, however, standing here, seeing this girl who had turned his world upside down, all of that self-doubt began to float away. And that smile. He hadn't realized how much he had missed that smile until right now. That split second of thought was interrupted by a sharp pain in Zook's head. Danger sense. Why is it activating here? Now. In another instant, he realized the cause of the alert. Rarica's quirk, zero gravity, allowed her to remove the effects of gravity from objects, causing them to float until she touched the tips of her fingers together. Apparently she had been using her quirk when he arrived, and clapping her hands had deactivated it. Now, a heavy steel beam was plummeting toward the earth, and Rarica was directly beneath it. Chapter 4. A few minutes earlier. You guys ready up there? Ichako Rarika scanned the top of the structure to make sure everyone was in place. She knew they would be. This wasn't their first time lifting a beam after all. Saru and I are ready when you are. Ribbit. Tsu called back down as the two prepared to lasso the beam when it got to them. I've got enough in me for one more before lunch. Sato shut the candy bar in his mouth to give him a quick power boost to hold the beam in place. Speaking of lunch, where's Kyoka anyway? She should have been back by now, Kuminari asked Todoroki. The two welders shrugged and returned to the task at hand. I've done a perimeter sweep, Iida called over from the sidelines. Everyone is in the clear. All right, here it comes. Rarika tapped the beam with her fingertips, and it slowly began to rise. The group had done the same procedure so many times, it was almost second nature to them at this point. As she watched the floating metal bar, her thoughts drifted to the events of the last year, how much good they had done for the community, and how she had finally found a way to help her parents. I honestly wasn't sure how everyone would react to the idea at first, but everyone immediately jumped at the opportunity to help out. Just being able to do all of this with friends has been one of the best experiences of my life. I'm so glad I was able to do this with everyone. Well, everyone except, hey guys. Kyoka's voice interrupted her thoughts. Look who I found while I was grabbing lunch. Rarika turned to see who she was referring to, and her heart skipped a beat when she caught a glimpse of that messy green hair. Dick! She shouted. She struggled to contain her excitement as she jumped up and clapped happily. Time seemed to stand still as a surge of emotions welled up within Ichako. Whether he knew it or not, this boy had been on her mind for a long time. They had become fast friends early on in school, and had built an even stronger trust in each other through the trials that followed. With that friendship, however, came some internal struggle as well. She had feelings for Dick that went beyond just friendship, but she chose to keep it buried deep inside. He's just so driven to pursue his dreams. It's the most inspiring thing about him. And especially with the responsibilities of his quirk, I don't want to become the reason for his failure. I don't want him to change who he is for me. It's better that way, right? Now, however, seeing him standing there with that goofy smile on his face after all this time, maybe things could settle down. After all they had been through, maybe they could. Rarika watched as Midoriya's face shifted from happiness to pain to panic in an instant. Something wasn't right. She glanced up to see the beam she had been floating. Except it was no longer floating. It was accelerating rapidly toward her. Before she even had time to think, she felt something wrap around her waist and pull her. As she flew through the air, she saw that Dick had used his black whip ability to pull her out of the beam's path. Rarika collided with her rescuer just as the beam made impact. She turned to look, and, as the dust settled, she saw that the beam had impaled itself vertically in the ground. 1 second longer and it would have been a goner. Thank you. Sure. Don't ever mention it. Rarika turned back toward the flustered voice. She looked down at Dick as he rested his head on the ground, his face abnormally flush. His eyes were locked intently on hers, not looking anywhere else. She began to feel heat rise to her perpetually blushing cheeks as she realized the compromising position the two had landed in. The embarrassment was only amplified by the gathering crowd of their peers. Some guys have all the luck, Mineta mumbled under his breath, but Rarika heard it all too clearly. Sorry. I'm so sorry. She scrambled to get off her friend. No, it's my fault. Dick quickly responded, trying to defuse the awkwardness of the situation. I wasn't as ready as I should have been. That was some quick thinking, Midoriya. Todoroki chimed in as he and the others from the roof arrived on the scene. It's honestly been a while since I've had to use Black Whip, so I may have overcompensated a bit when the reflexes kicked in. Dick gave Erica a concerned look. I didn't hurt you, did I? No, I don't think so. She rubbed the back of her neck. I'm just a little shaken up. My neck does feel a little stiff, but I'm sure it'll wear off. We're not taking any chances. Ida darted over. This is a recordable workplace incident. We need to cease all work activities until the proper procedures have been followed. An audible groans wept across the group. Ida, I'm fine. I just need an ice pack. Chaco couldn't help but chuckle at Ida's intensity. He may be a little too by the book sometimes, but the consistency had kept everyone safe and above board during the reconstruction project, so she couldn't fault him for that. Be that as it may, I insist we do a preliminary examination to verify the severity of any injuries you may have incurred. Ida turned to Kiyoko. Could you assist with an injury assessment? Yeah, I can check to make sure everything sounds. At that moment, Jin began screaming from inside the basket. Ugh, not again. Denki. What's up, Kiyoko? Kuminari walked over to his young bride. Our little stun gun hasn't been able to sleep all morning. She almost tased Midori earlier. Do you think you could? Say no more. Kuminari reached into the basket and pulled out the blonde infant. As soon as he had taken the protective covers off her ears, Jin launched her probes at Kuminari and began shocking him. His quirk allowed him to absorb all of it with ease, and within seconds, the baby stopped acting up altogether. He gently laid the child back in her carrier. Yari, cooed Jin as she drifted off to sleep. Man, does my face really look like that when I jam my brain? He asked Kiyoko as the two admired their sleeping child. Yup. Every bit as stupid. She gave him a quick peck on the cheek. And every bit as adorable. Chaco smiled at the cute little family. They seemed so happy together. She looked at Dick, who was also smiling at the scene. He turned to look at her. That's going to take some getting used to. What, the cameras? Rarico chuckled. Yeah. Dick rubbed the back of his head. I mean, I know I was gone for a year, but we weren't even out of high school when I left. It just seems like a lot in such a short time. I don't know, she lightly retorted. If two people love each other and they're on the same page, why wait? Yeah, I guess I can't argue with that, he said thoughtfully as their eyes met. The two sat silently like that for what seemed like an eternity. Rarico could feel her face heating up again. Midoriya. Iida's voice broke through the awkward silence. Would you mind helping Rarica over to the break table so we can perform the examination? Yes, sir. Dick jumped to his feet and nervously saluted. Before she had time to respond, Chaco felt herself being lifted up in Dick's arms. He positioned his arms in such a way as to support her head and neck. Her heart felt like it was about to break her ribs. Sorry about all this, Rarica, Dick quietly interrupted her thoughts. If I hadn't shown up so abruptly, you wouldn't have lost focus. Dick, you're fine, she reassured her friend. I'm honestly just happy you're here. And in one piece too. The last time I saw you, you were lying on a gurney being loaded onto a helicopter. Yeah. Dick's eyes looked distant for a second before snapping back to the present. Not exactly the best last impression, huh? The two chuckled a little as they all moved toward the break area. So, Midoriya. Mina came over with a sly look on her face. I see you brought Melissa with you. In all of the confusion, Rarica hadn't noticed Melissa had arrived with Dig. A tightness began to form in her chest. Keep it together, Chaco. Don't jump to any conclusions. Yeah, how has recovery been going, Midoriya? Sarah winked as he nudged Dick with his elbow. At this, Ichako could feel Dick tense up. And no, it's not like that, guys. Dick stammered. Melissa and I are both really close to All Might, so practically family. Right! Melissa jumped to his aid. He's like the little brother I never had. Well, I guess if you're into that sort of thing, Mineta chimed in just as a dark blur smacked him in the face. Don't mind them. Tokoyama put a reassuring hand on Dick's shoulder as Dark Shadow returned to him. You know how they can get. Rarika felt Dick relax a little as he placed her gently on the makeshift examination bed. As Kyoko began to assess her injuries, Ichako saw Mineta making a beeline for Melissa. The little terwit never gives up, does he? Kyoko said as she rolled her eyes. So Melissa, Mineta said with all the macho charisma his diminutive stature could muster. Aside from Midoriya, have you been seeing anyone lately? Huh? Melissa looked visibly uncomfortable. And no, not really. Honestly, between Dick's medical care and my advanced studies, time for that sort of thing has been in short supply. At this choice of words, Ichako and Kyoko nearly died laughing. Oh sure. Laugh it up. I'll be here all week. Mineta stormed off toward the lunch cart. The sound of screeching tires could suddenly be heard from outside the construction barricade. Ichako looked to see what the commotion was and saw her dad sprinting over to the table. Iana called me, and I got back here as soon as I could. Is everything okay? Are you hurt, Ichako? I'm fine, Dad. She gave him a reassuring smile. I just got distracted and let go of the beam too early. Thankfully Dick was here, or it might have been a different story. I'm just wrapping up here, Kyoko interjected, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. She does appear to have some minor whiplash, but nothing that an ice pack won't fix. Told you so. Rarika stuck her tongue out at Ida. Yes, well, rules are rules, he said defiantly. Well, I'm just glad you're alright. Her dad breathed a sigh of relief as he ruffled Ichako's hair. He then turned to Dig. So you're the Dig that my Ichako keeps telling me so much about. Dad. She groaned. She'd forgotten that her parents had never met Dig before. Sure. This might as well happen today, too. Izuku Midoriya. Dig bowed respectfully to her dad. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Rarika, sir. No need to be so formal, Midoriya, he said with a smile. You just saved my daughter's life, so the honor is all mine. Don't mention it, sir. Dick loosened up a bit. Actually, I was hoping I'd see you. I wanted to talk to you about helping out here. If you have room for me, that is. Of course. Her dad gestured to a trailer close to the construction barricade. Step into my office, and we can talk. Ichako watched as the two entered the trailer. Dick turned and smiled at her before shutting the door behind him. So Midori is finally back, Ribbit. Tsu had come over to check on her. Yeah. A contented sigh slipped past her lips. He is. Chapter 5. As Dick shut the door behind him, his brain was going in a million different directions. He had smiled at Rarika to put her mind at ease, but it definitely hadn't tricked the fear inside him. He always had trouble talking to new people, and while his time at UA had helped him improve, this situation was entirely different. This was Rarika's dad. If there was anyone he wanted to have a good first impression with, it was him. But what if I already blew it? I mean, I did save her, but I also caused the accident in the first place. What if he views me as a liability? Does he really want that on his construction site, let alone anywhere near his daughter? What if, Do the next right thing. Melissa's words cut through the storm in his mind, and he began to calm down. Focus, Izuku. This is what you're supposed to be doing right now. He turned to survey the tiny office trailer. Much of the space was taken up by boxes of paperwork, but not so much that it was unusable. Mr. Araraka stood by a water cooler, filling up 2 cups. Have a seat, Midoriya. He gestured to a folding chair sitting next to a folding table covered with documents. Sorry about the mess. You wouldn't believe all the red tape you have to go through to get anything done around here. He chuckled as he handed Izuku one of the cups of water. You'd be surprised. Midoriya recalled the events of the last 24 hours. After being gone for a year, I had quite a bit of paperwork to deal with too. Oh yeah. You were recovering out of country, right? All for one business left you pretty beat up. Mr. Araraka took a sip of his water. Or at least that's what I've heard from your friends. You seem to be doing better now though. It was rough for a while, but I had good friends to help. Izuku paused and looked down at the faint reflection in his cup. I'm just glad it's all over now. When Ochako told me everything that happened, I was shocked that all of you survived the ordeal as well as you did. Destiny must have big things in store for all of you. Dick gave a short, ironic laugh. Well, if it does, I'd really appreciate a hint right now. He downed the rest of his cup and sat silently for a minute. The thoughts of his goals and responsibilities slowly crept back into his mind. He snapped back to the present. Sorry, sir. I've just got a lot on my mind. No need to apologize. You've been through a lot, and I'm sure All Might's passing hasn't been easy on you either. Ochako said you were close. It hasn't been. He was like a dad to me. At the same time, though, I need to keep smiling and pushing forward. Izuku looked at Mr. Araraka with determination. I won't let his legacy fade away. All Might left some pretty big shoes to fill. He leaned back in his chair and stretched a little. Don't remind me. Midoriya ran his hands through his hair in frustration. It all just seems insurmountable. I mean, he was All Might, and I'm just me. How can I live up to that? The two sat in silence for a little while. Here, I want you to have a look at something. Mr. Araraka pulled out his wallet and handed him a small photo. In it was a young girl with brown hair and eyes that sparkled with childlike wonder. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, but the huge smile and rosy cheeks immediately tipped off Izuku as to the child's identity. Is this Araraka? Wow, she was just as cute back then, I mean. She hasn't changed a bit. He hoped her dad hadn't noticed the slip-up. If only that were true. A melancholy expression took over Mr. Araraka's face. The picture is one of Ochako's last truly carefree smiles before the real world stole out from her. It happens to everyone eventually, but it was too soon for my little girl. What happened? Izuku asked with concern. I'm still not sure. Maybe it was a stray bank statement we left on the table. Maybe some kids made fun of her. Maybe she just saw how much we are working to make ends meet. I'll never forget the day she ran into the kitchen with tears in her eyes, telling us how she wanted to use our quirk to help us when she grew up. Some dads would have been elated to hear that their child wanted to go into the family business, but not me. That wasn't my little girl's dream. However, no matter how hard I tried to encourage her, those goals of being a hero that makes everyone happy faded away. In their place were money-saving schemes and frugality beyond her years. Mr. Araraka's eyes glistened at the painful recollection. A 5-year-old should not know that eating less saves money, or that sleeping more lowers the electric bill, and yet I watched as she grew up, perfecting and refining those practices until they became a part of who she was. Sure, she remained optimistic and hopeful, but there was a burden behind those smiles. I blame myself for that. Not a day goes by that I don't think about all the things I could have done differently to give a Chaco a few more years of innocence, but I can't change the past. Mr. Rareka was as if lost in thought. Izuku also sat silently. He remembered Rareka telling him about her parents' situation. At the time, he saw her goal to become a hero to help them as noble and down to earth, but after hearing the other side of the story, it all seemed very tragic. He finally broke the silence. I never really knew my dad. He worked hard to provide for my mom and I, but the job left him overseas for the majority of my childhood. For what it's worth, at least you were part of Rareka's life. She may have been burdened to help you guys, but that's just because she knew how much you loved her. Yeah, I guess that's true. Mr. Rareka looked at him and gave a small grin. Anyway, we sent her off to UA, and things slowly began to change. When we talked on the phone, I could hear her passion for being a hero returning. I thought it must have been the teachers or the coursework, but then I started hearing stories. Stories about a clumsy kid who could barely control his quirk. She told us how he saved her from a giant robot when everyone else ran away, how he was driven to help people even at great cost to himself, and how that passion spread to the rest of the class. I talked to many of the faculty members during her time at UA, and all of them said that there was something special about our class. Something that went beyond the curriculum or the teachers. And that something was you, Dick. Whether you knew it or not, you had a profound impact on my daughter. I look at her now, and I can't see that burden I placed on her anymore. It's been replaced with an excitement to help everyone no matter what, just like when she was a kid. Mr. Rareka stood with tears in his eyes and walked toward Izuku. You saved my daughter in a way that I wasn't able to, and I am eternally grateful for that. Midoriya was stunned. I didn't really do anything special. I was just trying to be a good friend. I didn't want to see her give up on her goals. It's not just a Chaco though, Mr. Rareka said as he returned to his chair. I've been working with your class for the better part of the last year, and each of them has brought up times where you helped them in a similar way. Sure, they all have their own individual dreams and inspirations, but your friendship and encouragement pushed them all further than each could on their own. And, in turn, that drive helped them continue pushing each other. I've been in this business a long time, but I have never seen a more tight-knit group of people. And, I believe, it all started with you. Don't sell yourself short. It might not seem like much, but the small everyday actions you do to help your friends create ripples that reach out farther than you could ever by yourself. However, you have to let them impact you as well. You have a good thing going here. You have friends that care about each other, that legitimately want everyone to reach their best potential. Don't think you have to go it alone out of duty or something like that. Izuku thought back over all that he and his friends had been through and what they had accomplished when they worked together. Taking down Stain, rescuing Captain when the League of Villains had kidnapped him. Even when we were completely isolated on Neba Island, we were able to overcome the overwhelming obstacles, and the way we all worked together to help the community through our little interim hero agency was, his eyes got wide. Everything began falling into place in his mind. I know that look. Mr. Rareka smiled. It's also clear now. I was so overwhelmed with the enormity of the task in front of me that I couldn't see the obvious path staring me in the face. Thanks to All Might, I have everything I need to open my own hero agency. Izuku stood and began pacing in the small trailer. And not just for me. I can give my friends the chance to follow their hero dreams too. As equals, though, not just sidekicks. Each of them has helped me in more ways than I can count, so this is the least I can do to repay them. I'm glad to hear you feel that way. I feel the same way. Mr. Rarica smiled and cleared some papers off the table to reveal a blueprint. Which is why I'm building this. What's this? Izuku examined the document. An agency building. Your agency building, Mr. Rarica corrected the shocked young man. With everything that your friends have done for me over the last year, I needed to repay them somehow. I was actually finalizing the paperwork when Ada called me to let me know what happened. It was going to be a multi-purpose building, so they could use it how they saw fit, but I think your idea is better. It even has apartments for each of us, Midoriya said in amazement. Not having to worry about housing is going to be a huge weight off everyone's shoulders. Where is it going to be located? Well, if you'll just follow me, he said as he led Izuku out of the trailer. They saw the others returning to work on the structure, and Midoriya suddenly recognized it from the blueprint. Here. In my hometown. Overlooking the beach that my hero journey started on. Izuku couldn't believe it. He must have been dreaming. Yup. Mr. Rarica smiled and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. Welcome home, Dick. Chapter 6. You want to what? Midoriya had expected a reaction of disbelief from his friends. He was still trying to come to grips with everything himself. While everyone else finished work on the framework for the new building, he and Mr. Rarica ironed out a lot of the details for the plan. The two could hardly contain their excitement as they shared the idea with the group over dinner that evening. Dad, are you sure? Rarica looked intently at her father. I mean, half the reason we'd been doing all of this was to help you and Mom get back on your feet. Yeah, Kirishima chimed in. Don't get me wrong, sir. I think I speak for everyone when I say we're grateful for the offer, but it wouldn't be very manly of us to accept it and leave you back at square one, you know. Oh, believe me, after all you've done over the last year, we'll be fine. Mr. Rarica knelt next to his daughter and put his hands on her shoulders. Your mother and I want to do this for all of you. You've put your dreams on hold for long enough, and if this can help get those dreams back on track, we'd be honored to return your kindness to us. A tearful smile spread across Rarica's face as she threw her arms around her father and buried her face in his shirt. We'll not waste this opportunity, Mr. Rarica. Iida stood with his arms stretched toward the sky. I know you won't, he replied while embracing his daughter. But you can't give me all the credit here. I'm only covering the building. It was Midoriya's idea to start and fund the hero agency itself. And you're sure that's how you want to use your inheritance? Eliero turned toward his classmate with a look of skepticism. That's a pretty big investment. Yes, and a substantial risk. Yaozu's voice dripped with doubt. Especially considering our relative lack of professional experience. We've been through a lot together. Izuku smiled at his friends. I've seen firsthand what all of you are capable of, and I've experienced what we can achieve when we work together as a team. I can't think of a more worthy use for this gift I have been given. Besides, he glanced at Rarica as she wiped her eyes. It's better to team up with people you like. She smiled and nodded in agreement. I can't argue with that logic. Shoji's duplicated mouth grinned from the end of one of his arms. I'm in. Me too. Keta's rarely heard voice sounded from the rear of the group. I'll do my best to make sure you all sparkle as much as I do. Aoyama's unique endorsement was followed by similar agreement from the rest of the group. I'm in too, Melissa said excitedly. All of this has really inspired me to put my skills to some practical use. I've already got some ideas for support items that I want to try out. If you'll have me, of course. You only had to ask, Milady, Mineta responded seconds before Asui's tongue swiftly wrapped around him and restrained him from any further creepiness. We'd be happy to have you, Ribbit, the frog girl said as best she could. Everyone else eagerly agreed. I guess that makes it unanimous. Hector's disembodied voice sounded as cheerful as ever. It's gonna be just like old times. Yeah, except... Dick scanned group. Something was missing. He had been so caught up in everything since coming on site that it took him until just now to notice. Kyoka, didn't you say everyone was working here? She thought for a second. Oh, you're wondering about the Kugo. Ah, babe, I think you mean Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite Kaminari nudged her as he rolled his eyes. Yeah, he didn't want to join in. How did he put it again? Ashido suddenly jumped on a table with a fierce look in her eyes. You can all roll over and die for all I care. I'm not going to be a damn extra in my own story. What a jerk. Hey, you know Bakugo, Kirishima shrugged and smiled. When none of the other agencies were accepting new hires, he went out and started doing freelance work. He's been helping out different agencies when they need a little extra firepower for a specific mission. From a pro-hero standpoint, it wasn't a bad career decision. Yes, but it's a lonely path he's chosen to walk, Tokoyama replied from the shadow of the trailer he was leaning on. We've all been virtually out of contact with him since he left. He's made a name for himself, so we know he's active, Kyoka said, but outside of the news reports, we don't have a lot of information. Kekon. Midoriya's thoughts drifted to his friend, if you could call him that. The two didn't see eye to eye on many things, but they had developed a mutual respect for each other's abilities during their time at UA and through their shared knowledge of One for All. I wonder if he's doing alright. As the group's conversation returned to the exciting prospects of the future, Izuku excused himself and exited the construction site. He pulled out his phone and began scanning the recent news alerts. There's only one way to find out. As Midoriya flew through the air toward the city of Kuretsucho, he had a minute to think about his quirk. For most of his time with One for All, he had only ever been able to use it for training or in high-stress battle situations. This was one of the few times he'd been able to use it without any external pressure. The freedom he felt now, as he used a combination of float and his Delaware smash to propel himself toward his destination, was exhilarating. This must be what the other kids felt like when they first got control of their quirks growing up. It's no wonder they were all so excited. He remembered Kepkin's face when he first discovered his power, an explosive and volatile quirk that slowly blended in with his personality. Maybe, after all we'd been through, we can finally bury the hatchet. A bright explosion in the distance lit up the night sky. Izuku adjusted his trajectory and sped in the direction of the disturbance. As he approached, he noticed dozens of smaller explosions detonating in the same vicinity of the first, each creating a different colored fireball. Soon Dick was able to see a baseball stadium beneath the explosions, filled with people cheering at the spectacular sight above them. Hi! Izuku heard the scream coming from a hill next to the stadium just as a volley of projectiles flew into the sky and burst into flames, lighting the faces of the cheering crowd beneath. A fireworks display, huh? He maneuvered toward the source of the explosions and landed silently nearby just as the performance wrapped up. As he walked over to the lone figure, he heard a twig snap underneath his foot. In a flash, there was a gloved hand inches from his face. Wait. Kekon. It's me. Izuku panicked. He must have been so focused on the performance that he didn't notice my approach. Dick. A look of surprise crossed Bakugo's face as he dropped his hand. Midoriya thought he saw a bit of a smile in there, but it was gone before he could be sure, replaced with his usual glare. You moron. Give a guy some warning, huh? I could have killed you, you damn nerd. Sorry. Sorry. That's my fault. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. So you finally decided to get out of bed, huh? Yeah. It was a long road, but my recovery's all wrapped up now. So now you think you can just waltz back in here and surpass me, is that it? But Kuga's glare intensified. Midoriya reflexively raised his hands in defense. And no. Nothing like that. I just came back for All Might's funeral. He suddenly had a somber realization. I know you looked up to him as much as I did. How are you handling things, Tekken? But Kuga's face softened a little. It doesn't seem real sometimes. He was a hero that always won, no matter what. I always pictured him going out in a blaze of glory, but knowing that he quietly succumbed to his old wounds like he did. It's almost like All for One won that fight. Yeah, I know what you mean. The two stood quietly for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Eventually, Midoriya broke the silence. So the others tell me you've been doing freelance work. That's right. There's no way if I was going to sit myself on the sidelines with those extras. But Kuga smiled defiantly. If the agencies couldn't handle me, then I was gonna make it on my own. They all came begging for my help eventually anyway. That's awesome. Izuku congratulated him. So was the fireworks show a part of the freelancing? You got a problem with that? But Kuga's face turned serious. And no. It just seemed a little out of character for you, and we can't all get our futures handed to us on a silver platter, idiot. Some of us have to work for a living. Huh. What do I? I'm not a moron, Dick. All Might was the one hero, but he never lived like it. You were always his favorite. It's not rocket science. There was something in Kepkin's voice that caught Midoriya off guard. He'd only ever heard it once before, during their fight after the provisional license exam. Defeat. Flying solo hasn't been easy, has it? Izuku asked. The world isn't the same as it was when we were kids, Dick. Public perception of heroes never fully recovered after Yek. It's hard enough for established agencies to get back to normal, but it's even harder for a one-man show to get off the ground. I've managed. I've done my part, gotten a little recognition from the pros and the community as a whole, but this isn't how I want to spend the rest of my life. This is not the path to being no one. A moment of silent understanding passed between the two. Maybe I can help. Izuku broke the quiet. I may not be satisfied with my situation, but I'm not that desperate, Dick. But Kuga scoffed. Hear me out, Kekkon. I'm using what All Might gave me to start a new agency with the rest of our class. If you're tired of facing the odds on your own, we'd be happy to have you. What, you think I'm just gonna join the other extras on your little dick squad? Hard pass. It's not like that, Kekkon. We're all going to be equals in this. A team. Dick, if you honestly think that your quirk isn't going to overshadow everyone else, you're even more of a moron than I give you credit for. I'd be better off scraping by the way I have been for the last year. Something snapped inside Izuku. You've seen what we can do, Kekkon. You know what happens when our class works together. We took down the League of Villains and All for One. Together. So don't you dare imply that I'm somehow better than any of you. I wouldn't have been able to do any of that on my own. I know. I tried. He took a deep breath and calmed down when he saw Kepkin's startled face. You taught me that there are some fights you can't win on your own. That sometimes you need help. He held out his hand to his friend. Let me help you. But Kuga stared at Midoriya, and then at the outstretched hand. Nothing could be heard but the sound of bare branches scraping against each other and the distant sound of the city behind them. I don't need your help, Dick, but Kuga finally responded as he turned away. Kekon. Izuku felt like he had been punched in the gut. But he looked over his shoulder with a smug grin. You're definitely gonna need my help. None of you have been doing hero work at all for the last year. Someone's gotta whip you all back into shape and make sure to put you in your place if your head starts getting too big for its own good. Dig. We'll help each other then, Midoriya said with a smile as they shook hands. Welcome aboard, Dynamite. That's great explosion murder god Dynamite you, loser. But Kuga lashed out. I haven't spent the last year working on this brand to have you walk all over it. Sorry, great explosion murder god Dynamite, sir. Izuku was always caught off guard by Kekon's short fuse. Oh, speaking of branding, but Kuga switched to a gruff, yet informative, tone. If you don't have one yet, you're gonna want to look into getting a publicist on board. A publicist. Like I said, the world is constantly changing, and so are people's opinions on heroes. You're gonna want someone else to deal with that mess. I'm sure even All Might worked with one. He turned to leave. I'll drop by the office in the morning and get you losers back on schedule with the construction work. Izuku watched his friend launch into the sky. A publicist, huh? I guess that makes sense. Someone who knows how to deal with public relations would be helpful, and it would let us focus on the hero work. I wonder. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He had found it attached to the paperwork he dealt with earlier that morning. On the back of it was a handwritten note that read, "If you ever need help with anything, don't hesitate to ask." On the front, it had the standard contact information and a name, Kunsetsu Raige. I guess I can give him a call. The worst that could happen is he says no, right? Chapter 7 Midoriya stood at the foot of the massive skyscraper in front of him. When he arrived in Kyoto City, he had seen it towering above the other structures, yet he didn't expect it to be his destination. He double-checked the front of the building, which displayed the name of the company in big, mirrored glass letters. Hennet Advertising. This is the place. It had been about 2 weeks since Izuku had met with Bakugo, who, true to his word, showed up the next day to help with the construction project. Finally having the whole group back together was a big morale boost for everyone, and work sped up rapidly. While I would much rather be back helping the others, I need to take my role as agency founder seriously. If this Kunsetsu Raige can offer us any help with getting off the ground, then I need to put in the effort to make it happen. As he entered the building, a receptionist waved him over to a welcome desk in the middle of the wide-open lobby. Welcome to Hennet Advertising, where we strive to reflect your best to the world. How can I help you today? The young woman asked in a chipper voice. Her friendly smile and upbeat attitude put Izuku at ease. Hi, miss. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I have an appointment with Mr. Raige. Oh. Mr. Midoriya. Right this way, sir. The level of formality was foreign to the young man, but it did make him feel valued as a potential client. The receptionist led him to a glass elevator in the back of the lobby. Mr. Raige is waiting for you in his office on the top floor. I'll let him know you're on your way up. She opened the elevator door and motioned him inside. She then returned to her desk after pushing the floor button. As the elevator began to rise, Izuku looked through the glass at the floors passing him by. He had expected to see a lot of office space, but there were also conference halls, gyms, rec rooms, and a food court. About halfway up the structure, he began seeing something he wasn't expecting. Hero agencies. The names that I recognize are smaller agencies. I wonder why there are so many here. His train of thought was derailed by the stunning view of the landscape behind him. The sprawling city beneath him in juxtaposition to the nearby mountains and forests had him so distracted that he didn't hear the elevator door open when he reached the top floor. Ah, there he is. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku turned to see where the voice had come from and was greeted by a very spacious office taking up the entire top floor. The room was completely encased in windows, allowing a panoramic view of the surroundings. In lieu of two more floors, the room stretched up into a tall, domed roof. Toward the far side of the room, a man sat behind a desk that, while large, was dwarfed by the scale of the room it occupied. "Thank you for the warm welcome," Midoriya said as he exited the elevator. "And thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Mr. Raige." "Oh, please. No need for formalities. My friends call me Ken, and any friend of all might is a friend of mine." He moved to shake Midoriya's hand as he approached. "Well then, it's a pleasure to meet you." Izuku stopped short when Ken reached the other side of the desk. What caught him off guard was not Ken's piercing blue eyes, his almost translucent white hair, or his porcelain complexion. It wasn't the angular features of his narrow face, the sharpness of which was matched only by the blue business suit he wore. No, what caught him off guard was the fact that Ken was in a wheelchair. "That reaction never gets old," Ken said with a chuckle. "Oh. I'm so sorry," Izuku said frantically as he bowed apologetically. "I didn't mean to stare." No, it's fine," Ken patted him on the shoulder. "You get used to it after a while. I know it's unusual to see an otherwise healthy person in a wheelchair these days, what with society's medical advancements and technology, even quirks in general, although that didn't quite work out for me." "What do you mean?" Izuku asked. "I don't want to bore you with the details, but to make a long story short, my father's quirk gave him the ability to manipulate glass, and my mother had the ability to vibrate the cells in her body on command. The universe decided to give me cells with all the properties of glass, brittle and fragile being the most prominent ones. I can't tell you how many bones I broke doing normal things growing up. That must have made life challenging." Midoriya thought about Aoyama and how his body couldn't handle his quirk, or Todoroki's estranged brother and the conflicting aspects of his. "I guess quirks aren't always as positive as we make them out to be. It's a fact of life, Midoriya. We can only play with the cards we're dealt. I wasn't able to do anything that normal kids did, so I studied. Psychology, art, science, you name it. As soon as I got out on my own, I started this company. I figured that, if my quirk wouldn't allow me to help on the front lines, then I could use my ingenuity to help alleviate some of the burdens heroes face. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and the public is fickle. Heroes should be focused on saving lives, not saving face. I know All Might benefited greatly from your services," Izuku said. He never seemed to have any issues with public relations. "All Might. Now there's a hero that got it," Ken said wistfully. "He did everything for the right reasons. Never had to worry about a scandal with that one. Actually, the biggest surprise from him was when his true form was revealed in Kamino, but the public ate that up. I can't say if I blame them. As someone who personally struggles with physical frailty, knowing that one hero faced similar challenges was truly inspiring. He was amazing," Midoriya agreed. "It's a shame that he's gone now." But his legacy can live on through you," the man said as he spun his wheelchair back over to his desk. "I'm glad you found my card. When All Might said he wanted his royalty money to go to you, I said to myself, if All Might sees this kid's potential, then I'm going to keep an eye on him. I'm so honored to be able to assist you. And I really appreciate it." It's been a whirlwind of activity getting everything set up. Yes, getting a new agency up and running is no cakewalk, but I know you and your friends will do a great job, Ken said as he began typing on his keyboard. His response caught Izuku off guard. How did you? I told you, Midoriya. I've had my eye on you. A holographic screen appeared behind Izuku which displayed all of the information about the upstart agency, including profiles on all of his friends. That's thorough. Izuku was a little unsettled by the amount of information Ken was able to gather so quickly. What can I say? He shrugged in response. I like being prepared for these meetings. Keeps things efficient. Now let's go over the details. Looks like you've got a location in progress. That's good to see, although I am a little disappointed you won't be taking advantage of our office program. Office program? Oh, our clients have the option of setting up their agency in the building here at no additional charge. You may have noticed some of them on your way up. Now that you mention it, I noticed quite a few. We've had an uptick in heroes taking advantage of the perk ever since yet, which is fine by me. I want these guys cleaning the streets, not sleeping on them. Ken said with a laugh. I actually reserved a whole floor for your group. I'll keep it available as a backup. You never know when something could go wrong. I'll be sure to keep that in mind. Thank you. Don't mention it. Now, onto your team, Ken said as he scrolled through the list. With the exception of Melissa Shield, nice job bringing her on board. By the way, all of these people are your classmates from UA, correct? That's right, Midoriya said with confidence. We've gotten really close over the years and work well together. Synergy. I like it, Ken responded enthusiastically. It's quite the lineup for a new agency. Most heroes take a while to get even one sidekick. Actually, we're all equals in this, Izuku corrected him. They're all heroes just as much as I am. Ken thought for a minute. Okay, we can work with that. Who's going to be the face of the agency though? I thought the team as a whole would be enough. Midoriya wasn't sure where this was going. Alright, as your agent, I'm going to have to advise against that strategy. Some teams can pull off the group image approach, but they're usually much smaller than your group, and even then, they don't get as much recognition as he was talking. Ken pulled up a chart on another hologram. If you look at the rankings over the years, one of the things that the top slots have in common is that they all have a centralized figure for the public to latch onto. Take All Might, for example. Do you think he would have been as recognizable as a symbol of peace if he had 20 other heroes on his team getting equal time in the spotlight? I guess not. Izuku felt a pit in his stomach. Kekin's words about overshadowing the others echoed through his head. Now, I'm in no way saying that you need to make everyone your sidekicks. I'm just saying that, if you want the agency to carry on All Might's legacy, you're going to need to pick a frontman for the public to rally behind. Midoriya stared at the hero chart and then at the list of his friends. I'll have to talk this over with the others. I can't make that decision without their input. Of course, of course. Take your time. Ken nodded. Your loyalty to your friends is admirable. You don't see that too often these days. I just don't want to let them down. I'm sure you'll do just fine, Midoriya. Ken gave him a reassuring smile. Well, I think that about wraps up the initial review. Why don't you head on back and finish up that building? Let me know when you've made a decision on the brand image, and I'll start working on an advertising strategy to get you guys moving. Thanks again for all your help, Mr. Ken, sir. Izuku turned and began to walk toward the elevator. Oh, 1 second, Midoriya. Your quirk allows you to fly, correct? Ken grinned and pushed a button on his desk. The dome ceiling began to turn as an aperture opened to the sky outside. No need to use the elevator. Izuku bowed in appreciation, then leapt into the air. He activated flow once he had cleared the roof, and, with a flick of his finger, he sped off toward the construction site. As he soared through the air, he thought about the meeting, about Ken's advice, and about what he personally could do to help get his friends and the agency off the ground. Chapter 8. A cool autumn breeze blew across the field a few miles north of Musictafwa. Beneath the bare branches of a lone tree stood Achako, looking to the sky in anticipation. As she watched and waited, she saw a figure streak across the cloudless sky. "There you are." She smiled as she tapped her boots with her fingers, activating her quirk. "Let's see what these things can really do." She suddenly shot straight into the sky to intercept her target. As her attitude rapidly increased, the details on the figure came into focus, as did his surprised face as she rocketed directly in front of him. A burst of air in all directions stopped her friend in his tracks as she maneuvered back down and hovered right in front of him. "Rarika." Dick's look of bewilderment immensely satisfied her. "Sorry about that, Dick," she chuckled. "I saw you coming, and I couldn't resist." "Since when has your quirk allowed you to fly like that?" he asked, clearly still dumbfounded. "Since Melissa designed these boots for me." Achako gestured down to her fancy footwear. "Each one has a little turbine that's activated by my quirk, and their output is controlled by electromagnets." She did a quick lap around her friend to demonstrate the mobility the support items afforded her. "This way I can be more maneuverable without running the risk of my self-loading nausea kicking in." "That's amazing," Dick said as he floated to get a closer look at the boots. "I guess I shouldn't be surprised, though. This is Melissa we're talking about. I was out here giving them a test run, and I knew you'd be coming back from your meeting, so I wanted to show off a little." A mischievous thought crossed her mind. "You want to race back to the agency?" "Our race?" Dick sounded a little unsure. "Yeah! It'll be fun." Achako pumped her fist in the air. "Plus, I told Melissa I'd put these things through their paces, and what better test than a race against you and one for all?" Dick thought for a minute and smiled. "All right, you're on." The two positioned themselves for the friendly competition. "All right, ready. Set, go." Rarika shouted as she switched the turbines to maximum output and launched forward like a bullet. She could have sworn she heard Dick yelling something about cheating, but she was out of earshot before she could be sure. As she cleared the field and passed over the city, she watched as the buildings and streets sped by beneath her. In no time, she could see the finished exterior of the new agency building against its ocean backdrop. Almost there. Just a little further. A shockwave suddenly knocked into her as she watched Dick streak past her and land squarely in the courtyard of the complex. Achako smiled to herself as she made her way down to congratulate her friend. "Good job, Dick." She released her quirk and landed gently on the ground. "Even with a head start, I guess these aren't quite a match for you. Actually, I had to put a lot more into my Delaware smash than usual just to catch you." Dick shook out his hands and flexed his fingers. "Those boots are incredible. Imagine what you'd be able to do if you could float yourself for longer." He pulled a notebook out of his pocket and began frantically jotting down information on this new development. Some things never change. She smiled fondly at Dick. "Welcome back, Dick," Melissa called out as she walked over to greet them. "Rarika, how did the test go?" "It went great. I apparently gave Dick a run for his money." Achako jokingly elbowed Dick. "Those boots are something else, Melissa." Dick looked up from his notebook. I can't wait to see what else you've been working on. So far, it's mostly amounted to quality of life upgrades to complement everyone's quirks, she replied humbly as the trio walked into the building. Honestly, aside from Rarika's boots, the most significant item is probably Hagaku's jumpsuit. Killjoy. Mineta scowled at Melissa as he walked past them. You just had to go and ruin the best feature of her kui. Oh. He dropped the tools he was carrying and began rubbing his head in pain. Right behind him, a feminine-looking jumpsuit materialized out of thin air. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hagaku's elated voice came from the floating apparel which ran over to hug Melissa. You have no ideas how good it feels to use my quirk without constantly feeling self-conscious. Melissa returned the invisible girl's hug. Achako smiled as she looked around the lobby. It had only been 2 weeks since Dick had arrived, but the building was barely recognizable from the shell it had been. With the exterior completed, the interior work went pretty quickly. The electrical, plumbing, and HVAC work was taken care of, and the apartments were inhabitable. Now everyone was bustling around the lobby and office areas to get the walls finished there as well. Looks like everyone's been busy this morning, Dick said as he also surveyed the work. I guess we'll be ready for painting and furnishing soon. Yup, Rarika said cheerfully. Your agency will be up and running in no time. Yeah, my agency. There was despondency in Dick's voice that concerned Achako, but she didn't have time to ask about it before the others noticed their arrival. Midoriya. Iida's voice boomed from a scaffold where he and Tsu were patching up some drywall. How did your meeting with Mr. Rike go? The rest of the group's attention turned to Dick, interested in what he had to say. It went well, he replied. He seems very organized and on top of things. He used to be All Might's brand manager, so he's very enthusiastic about what we're trying to do. It sounds like he'll be a big help, Ribbit. Tsu hopped off the scaffolding and landed next to Achako. So did he give you an actual plan, or did you two losers just nerd out about All Might the whole time? Bakugo's condescending tone always had a way of cutting straight to the point. Oh no. Dick held his hands up defensively. Well, maybe a little. But he said he'd be working on an advertising plan to get our name out there. He did raise one concern though. What's that? Asked Melissa. Well, he mentioned that it might be difficult for us to gain traction without a central figure for the public to latch onto. He recommended that one of us should be the face of the agency, so to speak. That's actually a good point, Kuminari said thoughtfully. It was the same when Sero and I were training with the lurkers. Even though Kamui Woods and NT Lady were heroes in their own right, Edgerson took the lead position to create a unified front for the public to get behind. Dick let out an exasperated breath. I want this agency to be a place where we're all equals, where we can feed off each other's strengths and cover for each other's weaknesses. He looked in Bakugo's direction. I don't want anyone to be overshadowed or left behind. Just because we have someone at the front of this thing doesn't mean the rest of us will get left in the dust, Sero chimed in. It's like Kaminari said. Even with Edges at the lead, it was still a team of equals. I was training with the lurkers too, thank you very much, Mineta said with a bit of skepticism in his voice. That was a much smaller team. Need I remind you what happened the last time we tried to pick a leader for our group? We've been through a lot over the last few years, Mineta, Yaoza interjected. I would hope we've all matured enough that we could make a decision based on a person's character instead of just voting for ourselves. Well said, affirmed Diego as he climbed down to join the group. So shall we settle this dilemma democratically? Seems like that would be the best way to keep it fair, Ashido spoke up. Let's do it. A cheer of agreement erupted from the group. "Hey, Lednuts," Kyoko hissed from the front door. "Would you keep it down? Jid's still sleeping, and I'd like a chance to eat my lunch before she wakes up." Everyone quietly apologized. "Perfect timing," Iida said. "We'll take the vote before lunch, and Mr. Rarico can tally them while we eat." "Wait, what are we voting on?" Kyoko looked extremely confused. "I'll fill you in." Kuminari walked over and kissed her forehead. "Lunch smells good. What did you get today?" Everyone quietly dispersed to clean up for lunch. Ichako saw Dick smile nervously as he went to go help out. A flood of memories from the early days washed over her. Although we were all so young and innocent back then, the last 4 years have only solidified that I made the right vote the first time. But I wonder who everyone else will be voting for. The ballots were collected and passed off to Rarica's dad for counting. As the group spread out across the lobby to eat, Ichako noticed Dick sitting on the floor with his back against a wall, alone and lost in thought. "Is this floor taken?" she asked her distracted friend. "Huh? Oh, no. Please, by all means." He moved his box lunch to make a spot for her. "Sorry, I was just thinking about something Kepkin said the other day." She watched as his gaze returned to the abyss of his thoughts. "Is everything okay, Dick?" she asked with concern. "You seem like something's bothering you." "It's just..." He paused to gather his thoughts. "I know my quirk is powerful. It was designed to be that way. And I know that, with All for One gone, this amount of power is really unnecessary for what we're likely to be facing moving forward. I really want to carry on All Might's legacy using the gift he gave me, but not at the expense of everyone else. Maybe. I don't know." He breathed heavily and slumped against the wall in defeat. "Maybe it would be better if I sat off to the sidelines, so that I don't run the risk of forcing the rest of you into obscurity." "Dick, what are you saying?" Ichako looked intently at the downtrodden young man beside her. "This doesn't sound like you at all. The Dick I know wouldn't be giving up on his dreams that easily. He'd be pushing forward, doing whatever it takes to be the best hero he can be. And the Dick I know wouldn't allow his friends to fall behind. He'd pull us along with him, making us all the better for it. That's the Dick I know, and I'm sure the others would agree with me." He stared at her for a few seconds, then gave her a grin that made her heart melt. "Thanks, Rarica. You always know what to say to pick me up when I'm down." "Well, picking things up is my specialty." She winked and teasingly stuck out her tongue. The two sat quietly together as everyone finished up lunch. When it was all done, Ichako's dad came into the lobby. "All right, everyone, I've tallied the votes," he called out. Everyone stood and gathered around him to hear the results. "With a count of 20-1, you all have selected Izuku Midori as your team leader." Cheers erupted from the group. Rarico jumped up and hugged a very stunned Dick as everyone gathered to congratulate him. "Emmy," he stammered. "Are you sure?" "Dude, this whole thing was your idea to begin with." Kirishima punched his arm. "You've always inspired us to overcome our struggles and better ourselves through them," Todoroki affirmed. "None of us would be where we are today without you. If that's not the very definition of a good leader, I don't know what is," Iida said confidently. "Just don't let this victory go to your head, Dick," Bakugo snarled. "I don't know what to say." Midoriya wiped his eyes on his sleeve, overwhelmed by the show of support. "I promise I won't let you down." Ichako smiled at her friend. "That's the Dick I know." There was a lot of optimism and excitement from that point forward. Work on the building moved along at a rapid pace. Finally, at the end of the month, The Symbols of Peace Hero Agency was open for business. Chapter 9. It was a peaceful evening in Music-to-Foix. The glow of the streetlights illuminated the bustling crowds of people, bundled up to protect against the evening chill. Some were hurrying home after a long day at work, while others were out with friends for a night on the town. However, in a dark alley, away from the eyes of the cheerful populace, 3 men were about to start their job for the night. It should be right about here, said a short, stout man. With only his right eye open, he stared at the back wall of the building they had stopped at. Yeah, the vault's just on the other side of this wall. And you're sure there's no guards, Spec? A hulking form asked from behind him. Spec closed his right eye, opened his left, and proceeded to scan the brick structure once more. Not that I can see. Looks like the coast is clear. Change up. Perfect. That'll make this easy, the big man said as he wound up to punch the wall. Whoa, the big guy, the third man of average build, halted the assault. There are much more subtle ways of doing this. He held his hands open about 8 inches from the building. Liquid sprayed out of his palms as he moved his hands back and forth across the wall. As he moved from top to bottom, a mural of a simple wooden door took shape. When he had finished, he snapped his fingers, and instantaneously, a fully functional door stood in place of the fresh paint. The artist reached for the brass knob and proceeded to open the newly created doorway. Would have been quicker for me to smash it, Tag Change Up said with a huff. We need to save your energy in case we need to make a hasty retreat, friend, Tag replied as Spec walked through the doorway and into the bank vault. If you two are done talking, I'd like this to be the first of many stops tonight. Spec turned to his cohorts, still only looking through his left eye. He suddenly began switching between his 2 eyes and scanning the entry. Something wrong? Tag asked when he saw this behavior. I could have sworn I saw someone else by the door, Spec replied with concern. Change Up stuck his head out the door and looked around the dark alleyway. Nah, you must be seeing things, man. Now let's get moving. Like you said, there's plenty more where this came from. Good job, Invisible Girl. Keep tailing them. We're on our way. Dick spoke into his earpiece as he looked over the skyline from the top of one of the buildings. You get all that, Aegis? Yes, sir, came Melissa's enthusiastic response through the earpiece. Running across reference now. Dick smiled. Ever since the agency had opened, Melissa had thrown herself wholeheartedly into her role as support for the group. In addition to maintaining and upgrading everyone's gear, she also gathered intel and helped organize patrols. Dick remembered when she pulled him aside with a nervous smile before their first patrol. This is going to sound really silly, but when you're using your hero names over the chems out there, could you use Aegis when you're contacting me? She defensively held up her hands before he could respond. I know, it's childish, and I know I'm not technically a hero. I just always thought I'd be working in a lab for the rest of my life, and now that I'm here, getting involved like this, it feels like I'm almost doing actual hero work. And, Melissa, you're rambling almost as bad as me. Dick chuckled. You're just as much a part of this team as anyone, and you're providing skills that none of us come anywhere close to. You might not have a license, but you're our hero, Aegis. Upon hearing this, Melissa's eyes glistened as she gave her surrogate brother an appreciative embrace. These long-range communications devices you designed are incredible, Aegis. Ida's enthusiastic approval brought Dick out of his reminiscence and back to his rooftop vantage point. Even at top speeds, I barely notice its presence. It would be a lot easier to forget about it if you idiots would quit yammering all the time. Kekken sounded as chipper as ever. Aw, lighten up man, Kirishima chimed in. We're out on patrol, and we finally got our first real incident to respond to. That's gotta count for something. Speak for yourself, Shark Week. If I wasn't babysitting you noobs, I could've taken care of this by now. Yeah, and taken out half the block in the process, Rarica said, presumably under her breath, but her earpiece picked it up loud and clear. I heard that, round face. No, she's right. Dick tried to defuse the situation. These criminals aren't on a round page yet, so we need to know what we're up against to avoid as much collateral damage as possible. On that note, I've got some results to share, Melissa cut in. First up is Spec. His quirk, Headlight, gives him infrared or X-ray vision depending on which eye he has open. He likely used it to verify the lack of guards in the bank itself. And the lead lining inside the vault prevented him from tracking Invisible Girl. Dick thought for a second. He doesn't sound like much of a threat on his own, but that ability could give them an advantage in evading us. I can't stop twinkling and Tosikimi. Can you rendezvous with Invisible Girl? Do all that you can, but your priority will be neutralizing Spec. We must hear. Dick watched as a glittering figure began bounding across the rooftops in the distance. Maybe you could. Stop twinkling. For just a bit. Dick's attempt at tact did not go unnoticed, as the flashy form vanished into the darkness. Dark shadow will keep him hidden, Tokoyama reassured the group. Maintaining the element of surprise is key to our success. Thank you. Dick breathed a sigh of relief. Alright, next is Tag, Melissa continued. His quirk, Graffiti, allows him to spray a paint-like substance from his hands and materialize the resulting artwork. He uses this mostly for invasive and evasive purposes. Manhole cover on the road, tunnel through a brick wall. Oh. Like the coyote from those old cartoons. Kuminari happily interjected. A reality-bending quirk like that could be problematic. Dick analyzed the options. Bolt. If you can stun him, Grape Juice can gum up his hands and prevent him from painting us into a corner. Yeah, we're on it. Mineta replied half-heartedly. I guess catching a thief couldn't hurt my chances with the ladies. That's the spirit, dude. Kuminari encouraged him. Aegis, I'm not seeing much in the way of offense from these guys, Dick noted. Do we have anything on the third one? Change up. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to have a record yet. Hagaku said he was pretty big though. Sounds like he's right up your alley, Red Riot. Just leave it to me, Dick. Great. Gravity, Ingenium, Diri, Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite, and I will keep them contained and run crowd control, Dick said authoritatively. You don't tell me what to do, nerd. Kekken yelled into the earpiece. Now let's get this over with. Alright, that should be the last of it, Change Up said as he finished checking the vault's compartments. Perfect. Tag turned and shut the door to a safe that jutted out of a piece of cloth hanging on the wall. He snapped his fingers, and the safe returned to the painting it had been originally. Tag carefully folded the canvas and placed it in a pocket on the inside of his coat. Make sure not to lose that. Spec skeptically eyed his accomplice. Not to worry, Tag said as he buttoned the pocket and zipped the coat. I haven't lost my good luck charm yet. Don't get too cocky, Change Up said as he ducked out the doorway. We still have a long night ahead of us. Please, Tag said as he shut the door behind them. The rest of the night will be a snap. As he said this, he reverted the doorway back to a wall mural. All the same, we should get Mauve. Spec stopped short as he stared down the alley with his left eye. What is it? Tag asked. There's someone at the end of the alley walking towards us. Looks like a girl. Hate to break it to you, but there's nothing there, Change-Up scoffed. How can you not see her? She's standing right there. Spec, there's no one there. Tag looked at his cohort with confusion. Perhaps I can shed a little light on the subject, messieurs. An unknown voice came from up above. Before the three could find the source of the voice, a beam of light shot out of the sky and into the ground. For a brief moment, a female form took shape against the light. An instant after it appeared, however, a flash of light shot out towards them, rendering them blind and confused. My eyes! Spec cried out in pain. Change-Up moved in front of his accomplices with his back to the light, shielding them from any further disorientation. As the light began to dissipate, a muffled shriek was dragged into the darkness. Spec, you okay? Change-Up called out as he blinked his eyes in an attempt to clear them. As his vision returned, he looked to the opposite end of the alley. What he saw struck fear into his heart. There was Spec, suspended in midair by a writhing, shadowy mass. A figure stepped forward from the darkness, but the shadows obscured his face like a mask. I suggest you two surrender, the figure said in a deep, menacing voice. Personally, I don't want to harm you, but my friend has more primal urges. A friend? Tag stammered as his vision cleared. At this, the massive shadow lifted off the figure's head and reformed itself into a towering monstrosity. With a deafening roar, it lunged in their direction. Cagnub. Let's book it. Tag yelled as he leapt onto his comrade's back. Change-Up turned in the direction of the main road and, with speed uncharacteristic of his girth, bolted out of the alley. Mission accomplished, Monsieur. Aoyama's voice came in over the earpiece. The one called Spec is currently in Dark Shadow's custody, Tokoyama continued. We were unable to apprehend the remaining felons. Good work, guys. Dick responded as he soared through the air. We'll hunt them down. Just FYI, Hagaku chimed in. The big guy is much faster than he looks. Might even be a match for you, Ingenium. I assure you, even if he manages to outrun me, Iida responded theatrically, he won't be able to outrun justice. Less talking, more running, 4 eyes. Dick almost didn't need the earpiece to hear that one. He could see Captain's fiery propulsion above the skyline a few blocks over. I've got eyes on the target. Rarica sounded off. Heading north on Main Street. Perfect. Kirishima shouted. I'm already on the north end. Red Riot, ready to intercept. Grape Juice and I are en route to help, detain and neutralize. Kuminari called out enthusiastically. All right, Ingenium and Gravity, you keep the bystanders out of their path. Dynamite, you and I will make sure they keep heading towards Red Riot. Dick adjusted his trajectory and launched himself toward Rarica. I told you not to tell me what to do, Dick. Dick sighed to himself. At least we're on the same side. As they converged on Main Street, they saw a black cloud dashing down the road. As they drew closer to ground level, it became clear that it was not a cloud, but a large blob of black liquid. Tag must be using his paint as a shield to protect them from outside attacks, Dick called into the earpiece. Yeah, well that won't last long. Dick watched as, in one fluid motion, Kaken gave himself one more propulsion burst, took aim with both of his hands, and fired off an AP shot up the speeding paint bubble. His arms recoiled back into flight position as he continued pursuit without losing momentum. As the beam reached its target, the blob exploded, sending black paint in all directions. As Dick dodged the inky projectiles, he kept his eyes on the now visible criminals. Based on the descriptions from Hagaku, he assumed the burly man doing the legwork was Change-Up, although he was considerably smaller than he anticipated. that left Tag riding on his shoulders. Dick watched as Tag looked back at him, smiled, and snapped his fingers. Pandemonium broke loose on the street behind them. Where the black paint had landed, holes suddenly opened up. What's worse, they seemed to be connected to each other. Pedestrians that entered holes on the ground were suddenly exiting holes a few stories up the sides of buildings. Drivers who swerved into walls to avoid the chaos suddenly found themselves launching vertically out of the ground. Dynamite. Stay on them, Dick said as he fell back. Ingenium. Gravity. We're on damage control. Dick felt one for all coursing through his hands. He lightly flexed his fists, creating just enough air pressure to propel him quickly toward the chaos, without endangering civilians or property. As he approached, several tendrils of black whip shot out of his back and hands. Using all the senses he had, he maneuvered the black energy toward the airborne pedestrians, catching them before they could reach the ground. Simultaneously, Rerica rocketed through the scene, propelled by her new boots. She weaved through the carnage, using her quirk to nullify the gravity on the plummeting vehicles and other large objects that found their way into the sky. On the ground, Iida darted around the painted chasms, moving pedestrians out of harm's way and clearing a landing zone for the suspended victims. "My baby!" A shriek sounded out just as Dick's danger sense kicked him. He pushed through the pain and saw a baby carrier falling towards the ground. He reflexively opened his mouth and shot one last tendril of black whip toward the plummeting infant. It wrapped around the carrier's handle and slowed the fall to a stop just inches above the ground. Dick breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Asui." Carefully, he and Rerica moved the grateful citizens down towards the safe space. "Hi!" The bloodthirsty cry over the camps nearly blew out the trio's eardrums. "Great explosion, murder god dynamite." Melissa's intonation over the intercom made it sound more like a curse word than a code name. The sound of an explosion made its way down the street as everyone turned to see smoke rising. "So much for minimizing collateral damage," Rerica said with panicked concern. "Get going, you two," Iida shouted. "I can handle this. I'll help you." Dick turned to see Higaku, Aoyama, and Tokoyama arriving on the scene, with Spec still detained by Dark Shadow. Without hesitation, Dick and Rerica activated their quirks and bolted in the direction of the explosion, knowing the civilian situation was in good hands. Within seconds, they arrived at a crossroad. On the left, Kirishima stood, hardened and ready to block any attempts at escape. Kuminari and Mineta covered the right road, while Kekken stood in the middle of a surprisingly small blast zone on the far side of the intersection. With Dick and Rerica's arrival, the two thieves were surrounded, ready to give up, losers. Kekken stood defiantly before his prey. As the smoke from the blast cleared, the two criminals came into view. However, instead of the giant that Higaku had described, or the bruiser Dick had witnessed, a wiry twig of a man stood beside the painter. "Sorry, Tag," he huffed, trying to catch his breath. "I used up all my juice." "No worries, change up." "I understand the gravity of the situation," Tag said with a slight grin. As the smoke completely dissipated, Dick saw a large, circular outline on the pavement, surrounding the culprits. Before anyone had time to react, Tag snapped his fingers. The sound of crunching cement and asphalt rumbled beneath them as a crack took shape where the paint had been. With a lurch, the section of roadway within the circle began falling rapidly into the ground, kicking up another cloud of dust and debris in the process. Reflexively, Dick shot black whip out of the descending felons as Kuminari fired an electric shock in their direction. Both of these made contact with Tag, preventing his escape as Rerica and Kirishima dug into the deepening hole to apprehend change-up. As Tak succumbed to the electric charge coursing through him, he managed to snap his fingers one last time just before Mineta secured his hands. The sound of rushing air and falling debris emanating from the chasm suddenly ceased. "Hey, small fry." Kekken stormed over to Mineta. He couldn't have gotten his hands tied up any faster. "Well, maybe if someone didn't create a giant smokescreen, I would have been able to see him sooner," Mineta replied indignantly. Dick and Kaminari rushed to investigate the opening. However, as the dust settled, they did not find a hole, nor did they find the circular outline that had created it. Instead, they saw an intricate mural. As they stepped back to get a better angle, Dick saw that it depicted the walls of the hole, which appeared to be about 10 feet deep. However, what really caught his attention was the bird's-eye view of the nighttime skyline of the base of the opening. That second snap must have deactivated his quirk, turning whatever was visible from here at that moment into this perspective street art, Dick mused. "This must be a picture of what was on the other side of the..." he gasped as his eyes got wide. "What is it?" Kaminari asked. "This looks like the skyline above." The four heroes turned their heads southward as the distant shrieks of a large group of people suddenly echoed down the long city corridor. The downtown shopping district. Chapter 10. As he landed on the edge of the falling chunk of earth, Kirishima dug his hard hand into the pavement to brace himself. He looked up to see how deep the hole was, but was met by a sky full of stars. He watched as a large, square banner fluttered in the air above him, bearing a circular image of some sort. The sound of an engine drew his attention to a small aircraft fleeing the scene. Rarika suddenly swooped out of the sky and landed next to him, her fingertips touching the pavement. "What the heck is going on, Gravity?" Kirishima called out over the sound of rushing wind. That ring tag painted on the ground must have been linked to that banner. Rarika gestured up toward the wind-tossed canvas. "How'd that even get there? Was it the plane? Is there another accomplice? We have bigger problems right now, Red Riot. This rock is minutes away from smashing into the downtown shopping district, and we've lost track of Change-Up." Her voice sounded strained. "Can't use your quirk to keep this thing in the sky?" "I'm trying," she said through clenched teeth, "but I'm barely managing as it is. Our weight is still going to be enough to keep it falling. How close do you need to be for your quirk to stay active?" Kirishima had an idea. "As long as I don't touch my fingers together, I can be anywhere." Kirishima grabbed her before she could finish and leapt off the street segment, which immediately slowed to a stop. "Hang on, and do whatever it takes to keep that thing skybound," he called out as the two plummeted to the ground. As the earth sped toward them, he could make out a clearing near the main entrance to the shopping plaza. "Sorry about this," he yelled as he wrapped his arms around Rarika, positioning himself between her and the rapidly approaching ground. He hardened his body just before they plowed into the sidewalk, shielding her from the brunt of the impact. "You okay?" he asked as he got his bearings. "I'd be better if you weren't crushing my stomach," Rarika weakly replied. Kirishima quickly released his arms and helped her to her feet. "Good thinking, but the fall did not help my nausea. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep that rock up there. I'll start evacuating everybody." Kirishima turned and ran into the shopping center. Upon entering the building, he noticed that the alarm system had already been activated, and the occupants were frantically heading toward the exit. As he scanned the area for the cause of the disturbance, Kirishima heard a monstrous scream. He honed in on the source and found a 10-foot monstrosity of a man standing in the central hub beneath a shattered skylight. The hulking brute turned towards Kirishima and started moving quickly in the direction of the exit with no regard for any of the other evacuees. Instinctively, Kirishima launched himself forward, planting himself firmly between the escaping civilians and the giant criminal. It's Change-Up, right? Out of my way, weakling. Change-Up roared as he charged at Kirishima. As he got closer, he threw a right hook at the hero, who barely had time to harden before impact. The blow knocked Kirishima back. Sorry, but that wouldn't be very manly, would it? He regained his footing and hardened his stance. You attack put these people in danger, and I'm not going to let you get in the way of the safe evacuation. Change-Up growled and charged at Kirishima, building up a tremendous amount of momentum behind his left fist. Just before the punch landed, the villain's clenched hand suddenly tripled in size as it pounded into most of Kirishima's upper body. Thanks to his stable foothold, he remained unmoved, but the blow had taken a toll on him. He watched as Change-Up's hand returned to a relatively normal size, but also noticed a slight decrease in his overall mass. So, your quirk lets you convert kinetic energy into muscle mass and back again, huh? Kirishima said as he put the pieces together. That's how you got so fast and scrawny when you were evading us before, and that free fall must have bulked you back up. Figure that all out on your own, kid. Change-Up smirked. Pretty smart. For a dead man. Nah, I never was top of my class. Hypothetical questions were the worst. Kirishima began hardening his body at an extreme rate. One of them has stuck with me, though. I've always wondered what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. As he cried out, his skin became jagged and rock-like. He felt the strength of his quirk flowing through him as he achieved his ultimate form. Red Riot, unbreakable. Instead of looking for a way around him, Change-Up charged straight at Kirishima for another punch. Good. I thought I sensed a bit of ego in there. If I can keep him focused on me, I can hold him here until help arrives. You know, I've heard of crash diets, but I think you're doing it wrong, big guy. As corny as the quick was, it was enough to aggravate the brawler into more close-range punches. Shut your trap, blockhead. Change-Up growled as he released a flurry of jabs at Kirishima, each one enlarging just before impact, and each one eating away at his overall energy stores. Is that all you've got? I'm a little disappointed. Kirishima continued taunting him as an uppercut connected with his chin. Most of my friends are less than half your size, and they all hit harder than you. A swift jab to his stomach confirmed Kirishima's theory. Change-Up was weakening. If you try a little harder, I might actually feel something. The felon cried out in frustration and began furiously launching punches at the unflinching hero. Gone were any attempts at efficiency. Blind rage was driving this fight now. Despite his outward bravado, Kirishima was growing concerned about how much longer he could keep this up. But, as the flurry of fists continued to impact his body, he knew that he would have to buy his friends a little more time. When the normal limit of his unbreakable form had passed, Kirishima was able to look Change-Up in the eye. He's wearing down, but he still has enough in him to make an escape. I just need an opening to put him out of commission. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the sky, shattering the glass ceiling above them. Kirishima glanced through the shower of shards to see that the falling rock that brought them down had been scattered across the sky by a giant fireball. He could make out a streak of green and black latching onto the larger pieces of debris and launching them toward the day, while another fiery figure rocketed in his direction. As Change-Up turned to investigate the explosion, Kirishima saw his opening. Red Gauntlet. He cried as he drove his hard fist into the behemoth's gut, knocking the wind out of him. As Change-Up flew back from the shock of the hit, Rarika suddenly darted in from behind and intercepted him, using her quirk to stop his movement. She followed this with an aerial drop kick that sent him slamming into the floor. Before the criminal could catch his breath, Bakugo blasted through what little remained of the skylight and landed next to him, holding his open palm over the villain's face. "I suggest you stay down, loser," the explosive hero said with a smug grin. Change-Up flopped back onto that ground in defeat. Rerika took a small sip from a water bottle as she watched the police load the bound and depleted villain into the back of their armored transport. She and Kirishima sat quietly on a nearby bench as they recuperate from their respective struggles, both having pushed well past their normal limits. "That was amazing, you guys." Dick ran over to them when he was finished debriefing the officer in charge. His enthusiastic smile was the biggest she had seen in a while. "Red Riot, the way you figured out his quirk and counteracted it on the fly like that. Incredible. Thanks, man." Kirishima gave him a thumbs up. "I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold out, but that explosion gave me just the opening I needed. And Gravity, I can't believe you were able to keep that suspended for as long as you did." Dick turned and looked at her, his excitement mixing with concern. "That must have taken everything you had. Are you alright?" "I'll be fine." Achako flashed a smile to hide how weak she was feeling. "Just need to sit for a minute, and I'll be in tip-top shape." She turned and punched Kirishima in the arm. "I can't take all the credit, though. If Kirishima hadn't thought to jump off and absorb our impact, there's nothing I would have been able to do to stop that thing from slamming into the plaza." "Well, thank you both for all your efforts," Dick said appreciatively. He turned to Bakugo, who had just finished getting debriefed on the collateral damage. "Not bad for our first incident, huh, Dynamite?" "That's it." Bakugo rushed at Dick and had him by the neck in an instant. "3 strikes, Dick. If you mess up my name one more time." "Oh, will you lighten up? You're making a scene." Achako stood up and pushed the two apart. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see a few of the bystanders whispering and exchanging incredulous glances. "Even you'd have to admit that Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite is a mouthful to say every time we address you." "Yeah, man." Kirishima threw his arm over Bakugo's shoulder. "Be thankful he wasn't calling you Kepkin the whole night." Bakugo glared at Dig. "Fine." He growled as he shrugged off his friend and pushed past the trio. "But you actions are on thin ice." And without another word, Bakugo launched himself into the sky to continue patrolling the city, leaving the 3 of them to watch as he disappeared. "He'll come around eventually," Rerika reflexively tried to encourage Dig. "Oh, that's just how he is. I'm used to it," Dick said, rubbing his neck as his smile returned. "Honestly, nothing could bring me down right now. Great job tonight, team." "Yeah! I'm ready for round 2. Kirishima pumped his fist in the air, then paused. "Although, I can't shake the feeling that we're forgetting something." The drone of an engine echoed over the otherwise peaceful countryside far from the city. A silhouette moved across the grassy fields as a small plane passed in front of the moon. As the aircraft flew through the tranquil darkness, the pilot prepared to contact his employer. Shortly after entering the proper code into a specialized communication device, a secure connection was established. "Status report," came a distorted voice across the intercom. "I did the job just like you asked, boss." The pilot responded. "I dropped the banner just over downtown and got you there." "Excellent. I knew I could count on you," the disembodied voice replied. "Unfortunately, I didn't count on 2 heroes making it through the portal just after the drop. No way they could ID me," the pilot said defensively. "I was too far gone." "Yes, but they undoubtedly noticed the plane, and your men are in custody. They'll be interrogated now. My boys won't squeal. I kept the details light," This was just another job to them. But they can provide information that would lead back to you, and that's close enough to make me uncomfortable, the voice said. I've learned not to underestimate a hero's resourcefulness. Boss, you know where my loyalties lie. The pal wiped some sweat from his nervous brow. Believe me, I know your resolve. I just want to make sure it's not put to the test unnecessarily. What do you need me to do? Oh, no need to worry about it. Just get out of the sky as soon as you can and lay low. I'll take care of the loose ends. Will do, boss. The pilot breathed a sigh of relief. He slowly massaged his temples, hoping to alleviate a headache that had started when the conversation took a stressful turn. Alarms suddenly went off in the cockpit as all of the instrumentation began malfunctioning. The pilot frantically prepared to bring the aircraft down for an emergency landing. His efforts were halted as his headache intensified, the sharp pain piercing his skull. He fought to maintain control, but ultimately succumbed as his vision blurred to black. It was a peaceful, moonlit night, far from the city. No one saw the crash. No one heard the explosion. And when the wreckage was discovered the next morning, no one found any loose ends. This is the end of the episode. Thanks for watching.